Well, first and foremost, welcome everyone to our very first in-person collaborative cafe. So thank you so much for joining us today. Of course, we've got some wonderful panelists to share their wisdom with you all and really enjoy giving the opportunity for you all to network and meet some people and hopefully walk away with some wonderful information. Hoping most of you have heard of our collaborative cafes before, but if this is new to you, HR Collaborative is a community of HR professionals and fractional HR experts who help make small to mid-sized organizations make work better. We provide HR talent and solutions when and where they need it. So in this cafe, we're going to be talking about the future of talent. And before you guys are all expecting a crystal ball, we don't have that, but we're going to talk about what we think or what we're seeing as far as trends and where talent is going, which we all know is important for all of us in our organizations. So our agenda this morning, we're going to start obviously by welcoming our panelists. We're then going to let them discuss the future of talent and what they're experiencing from their perspectives. We're going to transition into a Q&A session. I know that some of you provided those questions ahead of time, so thank you so much for any questions you submitted to our panelists. We're going to address as many of those as we can in the time we have available. We're then going to break out to our table discussions. For those of you that have attended our cafes before, we normally do 2 breakout rooms, but since we'll all be in person, we thought it'd be great to consolidate that time and really get dive deep into those conversations at our tables. We'll follow that with a report out like we normally do and share information, discussions from each one of the tables, and then we'll wrap up. So we anticipate this to be a lot of fun. We'll be sharing the presentation and table discussion notes after our cafe, so be on the lookout for your email. Probably tomorrow, so that information will be captured, but please feel free to use the notepads, pens, all that fun swag on your tables to keep track of any information you garner from today's conversation. So some of you may have noticed we have a substitute panelist here today. John has graciously stepped in for Jill, who had a family emergency and unfortunately can't join us this morning. So our panelists this morning, of course, we have Hilary Doe. As the Chief Growth Officer, Hilary leads the state's efforts to grow Michigan's population, economy, and reputation as the best place to live, work, raise a family, and start a business. Hilary works alongside the growing Michigan Together Council on a once-in-a-generation effort to grow our population, boost economic growth, and make Michigan the place everyone wants to call home. Beth, as our president and visionary here at HR Collaborative, Beth leads a community of HR experts who fill the gaps in organizations, the gaps that organizations have today, and build more sustainable people practices for tomorrow. Based in West Michigan, HR Collaborative provides that fractional HR for small to mid-sized companies across the sectors in the Midwest. Jon is a designer, author, speaker, and people strategist, and may we say an alum from HR Collaborative. And brings 19 years of professional and leadership wisdom to life for business owners and executives. He believes that talent is the only infinitely renewable resource, and HR is something that should happen with people, not to them, but as a journey through the peaks, pits, and transitions of life. And then Nancy, thank you so much for stepping in to be our moderator today. Nancy Johnson, one of our wonderful team members, is a passionate HR leader with more than 20 years of experience creating positive employee journeys. Leading HR Collaborative's HR client services, she makes work better for the firm's community of HR experts and clients so that they can do the same for their workforce. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator and panelists for today's discussion.
So let's start with you, Hilary. New roles allow us to rethink work, and we're here to talk about, the future of talent. You're in a new role, and not only is it new to you, but it's new to the state of Michigan.
Yes.
Can you tell us about the Chief Growth Officer position and how it came to be, and what your initiatives are and goals as you step in?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question, and thanks for inviting me here today. I'm so happy to be in this beautiful room with all of you, and also happy to see lots of friendly faces and folks I worked hard with over the last few months. So the governor announced this Chief Growth Officer role in June, so I guess I'm 4 months in. And yes, it's the first Chief Growth Officer role in Michigan, but also the first any state has named in the country. And the really task at hand here is for us to think about and grow Michigan's population, which of course requires boosting our economy, thinking about strategies for talent retention and attraction, and also telling our story to one another, to ourselves in the state, and also across the country and frankly around the world about why Michigan is a great place to call home. You know, I'm from Michigan originally. I'm a boomerang, they say. I left the state, lived in New York City for about 10 years before I moved back in 2018. And so I'm very well aware. I had lots of reasons for coming back to Michigan. We already have an incredible story to tell. We already have an incredible amount of talent, great universities, and we're actually a net importer of young folks coming here to get their degrees. But of course, there are always ways to improve, right? If we love a place, we can think critically about how to engage in, continuous improvement. So it's better and better for the residents that are already here and for folks that are thinking about calling Michigan home. So the work that we're engaged in now is both thinking about, structural policy reform that we can lean into to make our communities better places to call home for families and young folks, to make sure we have good opportunities for our folks here in the state. But also to think about those, programs and incentives and that marketing that's going to help us tell our story better across the state. So I could say a lot more, and will, but yes, it's been really exciting to forge a new role, and also, a big challenge for sure. So I just keep saying to folks, it's a group project. So I'm so grateful to be in this room today. You cannot do something difficult like this without everyone. So if I can plug one more thing, we've been really all over the state with exactly that intention. We came from the UP actually last night, but we'll have done 70 events between the beginning of September and the end of November, ensuring that we're hearing from Michiganders about what they love about the place that they live and what's between them and calling this place home for their future. So I'm hoping to learn more about that today from all of you.
Thank you so much. That is such important work because we know, right? It's all about the talent. And it's all about the people who make up the communities here, and so
it's our best asset. I feel like I already heard that today. I'm sure I certainly agree.
Absolutely. So John, let's shift a little bit from, say, the state level to the large corporation space here. And you're with Steelcase, and we know we love Steelcase, very forward-thinking and progressive organization that calls Michigan home. You are part of the Talent Futures department. So that's a department that, you don't see at every organization, right? But yet it clearly shouldn't surprise me coming from Steelcase. Can you talk to us a little bit about what the Talent Futures team works on and even more specifically your role within the employee experience design?
Yeah, absolutely. So Steelcase really takes a future back approach. So we look at all the signals out there and what does the future of work and the future of talent hold, and then we kind of backcast and figure out what are the most bold scenarios for us. And Steelcase really put a pin in making intentional investments in helping our people belong, learn, and thrive. So we realized that those are three things that if we invest intentionally, we're going to be around for the next 112 years, right? We celebrated our 112th birthday. So, so what does that mean? It means that we, like Hilary, our listening systems are really important. So what our team does is to really understand the moments that matter for our employees. Things like feeling welcomed by my new leader team in the first week, right? Things like navigating my first family emergency with Steelcase. Those type of things, and then architecting very intentional experiences around those that are useful, usable, and used. So really making sure that we're again, HR is something that happens with people, not to them. So it's a very different mindset. Because at the end of the day, we believe that the experiences that we create shape people's beliefs. Beliefs drive behavior, and behavior that persists over time becomes the culture. So it really starts with the experiences we're building in our organizations. So some examples of those things might be an AI nudge-based program for our managers to deliver a more personalized experience to their team members before they walk into their one-on-one. right? Maybe taking our performance management from a performance evaluation to a performance improvement conversation. Really thinking differently about well-being, right? Comprehensive investment in well-being, both in our manufacturing and distribution plants, where we're saving, by offering clinical massage, believe it or not, in the manufacturing plants, we're saving more than $3 million a year in repetitive motion injuries, right? Things that seem counterintuitive, but are really powerful, and investing in things like mental health first aid for all of our managers. So,
And Beth, our visionary and founder of HR Collaborative, you've really spent your career not only developing talent and developing some great HR talent, I might say, but
If she does say so herself.
But moreover, your, I think, most impactful work has really been working with small to mid-size business leaders in strategizing how to achieve their goals through their talent and optimizing talent. Today we're talking about the future of work. How have those conversations changed from when you started in this field to where we are now?
Good question. So, years and years ago, a long time ago, I started with a small company here in West Michigan, and we had about 100 employees, a little plastics company on the southeast side of town called Cascade Engineering. And as some of you who know it, it has grown quite significantly. But I was privileged enough to be the first HR person at that organization, and learned very quickly that if we were going to compete with the Steelcases and the Herman Millers and the LACs and other large employers in town, we needed to be creative about how we put together resources. And that experience has really informed what we do here today at HR Collaborative, because we've figured out ways to be creative, to apply the axiom, necessity is the mother of invention, and be able to put together unusual combinations of talent and resources so that we can serve the needs when and where you need it. And which, as it turns out, is a pretty valuable offering for a lot of different companies. You've all heard the statistics that 90%, 92%, 85% of the people work in small and medium-sized businesses. They really are an engine for growth in almost every community that they're in. And more importantly, they're the ones that need the talent even worse than the larger organizations. I mean, think about it. When you lose a good talent out of 10 people, it really makes a difference. When you lose it out of 1,000 people, well, you're going to refill that position at some point. But man, that good talent is really necessary to grow the businesses that we have in this community and in other communities as well. So it's been a fun journey to be able to use that creativity and also to engage other folks, many of you who are in the room here, who believe in that level of experience and are willing to make the commitment to help other organizations grow here too.
Thank you. Hilary, I saw you shaking your head about the small and mid-sized space. Do you want to add to what Beth just shared there?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the truth. It's just the truth. And when we think about growing the state, we have to be really cognizant of the role, for example, entrepreneurship and innovation in small business. Almost 100% of new jobs are coming from, those entrepreneurs who are dreaming of something that they make real. And so we have to be thoughtful as one leg of the stool, certainly, to our growth strategy, that we're cognizant of those kinds of organizations. In addition to, the other legs of the stool, we're making sure that we're great partners to our big employers. So, all those things are critical. I guess I would say, actually, when we think about population growth and talent retention, I'm sure a lot of you have had this experience too. I'm coming to this work most recently, actually, as having been president of a global technology company. And so I was on that side recently trying to attract talent as well. But when we think about this, it's not a silver bullet. And instead, like you said, folks are, it's a whole human experience, right? And so there's not one answer. I said leg of a stool, and I find myself saying that all the time, because that's also true in terms of the offering that we have to make to talent in order for it to be successful, right? That it needs to be both a great opportunity, a good job, It also needs to be in a great place, in a vibrant community that they want to be. It needs to be a welcoming place to call home. All of those things are critical. So I am really grateful actually to have been given a role that's not, trying to knock this out with one narrow program, but that's taking a real ecosystem approach. We need to think about everything from our pre-K-12 systems and if those are supporting traction and vibrant communities or not. We need to think about our higher ed pipelines. We need to think about our infrastructure, our transit, our housing, just as much as we think about our marketing and storytelling and our direct talent incentives. So we're really trying to zoom out and take a comprehensive approach in order to include all those dynamic elements of a growing state.
That's absolutely right. It's just so multifaceted, the solution and the problem, right? So what I'd love for us to move to now is getting a glimpse from your own personal seats, right, of where you're at, on at least one future of work topic that's really important to you. And to do this, I'll have you finish this sentence for me. The future of work is, yeah, I know, it'll be hard to choose one descriptor there. But then tell us why you said that, and how is that impacting you from your role, and how are you integrating strategies with that? So, John, can I pick on you first?
Sure.
All right. The future of work.
The future of work is deeply human. So what do I mean by that? As you heard in the intro, we believe at Steelcase that our people are only infinitely renewable source of energy in the organization, right? Everything else depreciates. And they're the ones that create the competitive advantage. And generative AI is upon us, let's be real. And so we're gonna have all kinds of augmentation, and that requires thinking differently about people and about what we're here to do. I think we've all been sort of taught to treat our talent pipeline like a manufacturing line. And I think the HR of the future is really about thinking of it more like a terrarium or an ecosystem, right? And so how are we, as we talk about belonging, learning, and thriving, how are we scaffolding our organizations and changing those experiences that people might be used to? Because at the end of the day, critical thinking, common sense, creativity, none of those things can be done by generative AI. Right? And we need our people to be at their best. They have to be able to do deep work, to be able to focus on those things that matter, and they're only going to do that if they're not cognitively overwhelmed. And so the era of extracting as much as possible from our workforce is shifting quickly, right? So now it's about how do we be a regenerative source of engagement and energy, so that people can do their best work and we can be competitive and differentiated.
Well, and to what you said there, people will need to be adapting and changing along, and for humans that's hard, right? So how do you walk alongside them when the future of work is demanding different skill sets and capabilities? Yeah.
Yeah, right. It's things like community, right? Like DEI efforts, right? Thinking like every experience we create, I look at 3 lenses: equity, engagement, and ease. I'm creating equity with, so that there's some semblance of that this is equitable for everybody across the organization. Engaging, of course, and that varies by talent segment, so I have to understand what's engaging for one group versus another, and then is it easy? Because if it's not easy, no one will refer it and no one will do it again. So if we want a repetitive process, it's got to be easy. Yeah, I think, and just investing in things like well-being, and we can talk more about that later.
Sure. Yeah. Great, thank you for that. Beth, the future of work.
Future of work. Well, first of all, I have to say that I've missed all the alliteration that you've used in the past, John.
It never leaves me.
It's the future of work.
Truly, and you'd think I would remember all those things, but I guess I've blacked out. I'll have to review them with you later. Anyways, the future of work, from my perspective, is flexible and fluid. as I look around this audience, I know probably half of you have experienced some change in your business this week. And if you haven't, it'll be this month, or it'll be next month. And things are just moving at a pace that is rapid and getting rapider, right? I mean, we're all in that world. And so being able to plug in when you need folks and plug out is the way of the future. And using the talents that are available to you at the time when you need them is what obviously we're all about, but we truly believe is the way that the world will go. I was mentioning to this group when we first got started that I have a magazine, a Fortune magazine from September of 1994. And the cover, September 1994, almost 30 years, right? The cover of it says, "The End of the Job." And it's an article by William Bridges talking about how the whole idea of the Industrial Revolution and the jobs that came out of that are going to be changing so dramatically. And it took about 30 years for it to really get in a pandemic, 30 years in a pandemic to get us to that point. But I think today we're truly feeling what Bridges was saying back then, which is the whole idea of the Industrial Revolution is now evolving to a point where talent becomes more important and where people use their skills and abilities where they're needed, as opposed to lining up with a job description and saying, this is where I'm going to be for 40 years.
Flexibility, then, you tie it to your business at HR Collaborative. How are you integrating that into the strategies for helping clients?
Well, certainly for many of you, there's a couple of folks out there who are part of our Flex Pro pool and who have been serving our clients very effectively. So thank you to all of you who are here. But I think even those of you who are working in an organization have probably seen your job, your experiences change much faster than you would have expected them to maybe 20 years ago when you sign up for a job. And we continue to hear folks say over time that we have so much turnover. The young folks, they think, they're only here for a year and then they take another assignment or they quit and they go somewhere else. And that's true. It is actually true that the average tenure of jobs is now almost less than a year for people to stay in position. And that's just the dynamic of how the future is. And so if you can't fix it, you feature it, right? And you make it work.
And I just to comment on that, and let's be clear that HR never was, it was always a collection of tasks that didn't fit cleanly anywhere else in the business ecosystem, right? So it wasn't easy to begin with, and it just got more complex.
That's very true. That's very true. I'd love to hear all of you tell you that one thing on your job description that you're like, I have no idea why this got on here. I do it anyways.
Oh, that's great. And I have heard you say if you can't fix a feature, maybe a time or two, but it has served us well.
But incorporate that in my lexicon.
So Hilary, it's your turn. The future of work.
Well, I feel like I'm cheating a little. There are two great answers. But for me, I love the human answer in particular, and I love these events because I feel like I always need sort of, partners for the future. So I'm excited to continue these relationships. But what I was going to say, actually, when you said the future of work is, what came to mind for me is creative. And I feel like that's reflective of some of what you both just said, both in the sense that we need to be flexible, but also in the sense that is so innately human. And, I've reflected a lot as I've been touring the state, talking to folks about what they love about this place and what they want in their future and what they're looking for in a place to call home. And we obviously have in Michigan such a rich diversity of lived experience. I think that's one of our biggest assets, such a diversity of places and people. And so many of these sort of Michigan dream stories about how folks arrived here. People whose family came from other parts of the world, of course, and other parts of the country for these different industrial booms and, sort of chasing different dreams. And I certainly have one of those myself. And as I've just been listening to both that past and what folks are looking for in the future, a common theme that I'm just curious if it feels resonant in your companies, having heard these two shares, is that, folks are and want to be and pride themselves on identifying as makers, just over and over. That, whether you're manufacturing something or you're a carpenter or a millwright, there's pride in craftsmanship. That in the state, folks have always, it was never just cars, right? Folks always dreamed of something and then made it, created it in reality. And I'm coming from technology, so I think I'm reflecting on, something that could be portrayed as a culture of convenience innovation, whereas in contrast, what I hear in Michigan is a desire to make something real. Whether that's make real change, make real, assets, make real products. And it just feels so resonant in an era where, like you said, we have AI, there's sort of these new pressures and challenges. And if we think of ourselves as makers and lean into that destiny of folks here in Michigan, that unique, distinctive competency, whether you're an entrepreneur or a small business owner or a manufacturer or a crafter, you know what I mean? That sense that we can all be makers here, and we always have been, leading the world in that. I feel like it's such a valuable central identification for us to then reflect on all of our systems. So we mentioned, how do we prepare folks for a world where there are a new set of expectations on, the workforce? Well, I'm sitting in a seat where we have both the challenge of thinking about everything, but also the opportunity to think in an ecosystem-based way. So I'm hearing our pre-K-12 work group wrestle with, how do we get workforce into the classroom even earlier and let folks create and give credit for internships and care less that classes are exactly 55 minutes? How do we think a little bit more in higher ed about ensuring that they can, create and be entrepreneurial and, sort of find a way to get those ideas funded and supported here instead of leaving the state just as soon as they're about to hire their first 50 people? These sort of valuing and putting in the center these expressions of creativity. I'll give you a third. We have now a new class of manufacturers who are engaged in the work of changing the way young people across our state think about manufacturing. Because it doesn't look the same. And creativity is at the center in so many ways of those roles. And I was talking to folks at Our Next Energy, they said a lot of people in our quote-unquote line are sitting at a laptop, dreaming and innovating. And so there's this work that we can do together to both start by listening to how folks identify, thinking about the future and some of those challenges, but also thinking about our opportunity here to leapfrog as a state and come out the other side acknowledging that the future of work is human and creative and flexible, and we can do everything in our power to prepare our young folks for environments that prioritize their creativity and see ourselves as makers. And, it's only been in the role for 4 months, but it's an inspiring idea to chase. It's been really motivating to put that at the center and think about, if this is who we are, how do we reflect that in every aspect of what we do and build a place that's undeniable when you think about whether you want to stay or go?
Thank you for that. That sounds very inspiring to me. And aren't you glad that we have a chief growth officer from the state of Michigan?
Yes.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. But talent, it is a finite resource, right? So last month, the Bureau of Labor Statistics published employment projections for the next 10 years. And not surprisingly, it's forecasting, again, a decline in labor participation. And in fact, to the number of potentially 7 million workers who will be either disengaged altogether or scaling way back in the participation in the workforce over the next 10 years. You couple that with our lower birth rate that we're seeing here in the United States now, and we know for the foreseeable future we have a talent shortage. So this is a question for all of you up here. What do employers need to be doing now to prepare for this landscape, if you will, and make changes in their businesses now so that they can have some resiliency? So I'll start with you, Hilary.
I was going to say, I thought, so I'll be mindful of my airtime. Shockingly, when I said yes to this job, I knew all those things. And I was like, sure. I will say that all those sort of national trends and challenges that we're facing, we're also facing here in Michigan. But if I can highlight a couple specific challenges we need to tackle here, and then feed into your question. So in order to grow our state, we need to win the net migration battle, just period. And we currently are an outflow state. So we see more domestic migration out of the state than we see into the state. We're net positive on international migration here in our state. We're net positive on bringing new students here in our state. But domestically, we see more folks choosing to go than are choosing to come. That's a perception battle, of course, but it's also really digging in and thinking about what folks are looking for and a place to call home. We're doing both of those things. We also have an aging challenge here in our state. We're aging more quickly than our neighboring states. And the whole country is facing the broader challenge of, a big generation of workers and the baby boomers who are, approaching retirement or choosing retirement now. And so there is this downward pressure on talent in the workforce. So all those things are, of course, true. And what that's sort of flagged for us at the state when we think about what we can do to be supportive and be good partners to our employers, big and small, across the state. We did a poll, we're doing surveys across the state here, and we did a poll of young folks in cities that are growing among young folks across our country. And we heard a handful of things that I thought might be valuable for this room. So one that we didn't expect among the 18 to 24 set around the country was when we asked, hey, what would cause you to think about moving to a new job or a new state that you've never thought of before? We give a bunch of options. It could have been student loan forgiveness, cash incentives, just a bunch of options. The number one answer, far and away, would be everything else, was a down payment on a home. Housing and the housing crisis we're facing across the country, everyone feels it. And if you're in cities that are more expensive, they feel it. If you're in places that are growing, you feel it. If you're a young person who dreams of the equity and intergenerational wealth transfer and all of that, but does not have access to it, the number one thing is housing, over and over again. Again, the state can be a great partner, I hope, to our employers in supporting and thinking, dreaming into what we can do here that's unique and make us best in the country on that. And then the other thing we hear is our folks that want to participate in the labor force. So when we have declining, numbers of folks, we better ensure, right, that everyone who wants to participate can. And we see real challenges with folks making that choice, as we all saw during the pandemic, because in particular childcare and elder care. And so, if it doesn't make sense for you, even if you really want to show up to work because you have a responsibility of care at home, what can we do to alleviate that burden? And we're really dreaming into that as well. I did mention this in the beginning, but some folks here actually have participated, so I want to call it out. At around the same time my role was announced and my team was announced, the governor announced the Growing Michigan Together Council. They're sprinting between now and the end of the year to make recommendations that they put on the governor's desks to help with some policy reform issues. And I can tell you that they're wrestling right now with housing, childcare, transit, talent attraction and retention incentives, infrastructure investments, all of these sort of big things that we've been seeing and trying to validate in our surveys and polling and public engagement events so we can pour those right back into the council. So I'll say there's real action and momentum right now for us to lean into these insights and do the work to try to take advantage of, actions that we hope will increase this labor force participation rate long term.
Thank you so much for that.
If I may, I'm very excited about the initiatives around childcare, particularly, as I know many of you who have been in this business for a long time, know that we've been working on childcare for a very long time. Since women came back to the workforce, we've been working on childcare, and it has been a challenge. So thank you for the leadership on that. Truly appreciate it.
And we all saw, right, during the pandemic, I was at home with two babies, a 1.5-year-old and a 3-year-old crawling on my laptop while we worked for, at home. And it's such a challenge. We saw, as you all well know, labor force participation rates among women fall to what they were in the early 90s or something. We lost just decades of progress. And although there have definitely been rebounds, the challenge is still very much there. And from an affordability perspective, it can be as much as your mortgage to think about childcare or more. So it's just an unsustainable situation for us to be in going forward.
Wonderful.
Before we move on to some of the questions from our audience members here that have registered them in advance for us today, thoughts from you, John or Beth, on what employers should be doing now, given the talent shortage of the coming years?
yeah, you've heard the old adage, a pound of, or an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Well, an ounce of retention is worth a pound of recruiting. Beth will tell you that. She will tell you.
Yeah, you have the quotes.
I love this training. I can remember my own stuff.
I will wear all of them.
We'll hook you up, Hillary, we'll hook you up.
Recruiting is expensive, and I will tell you, I was just at a conference a couple weeks ago with somebody from the rocket companies in Detroit, and they are doing an amazing, in fact, they were from the amazing department. And I was like, that's cool. And what they're doing is, they put so much money into internal mobility, right? And how many of us, we still have this old model of we gotta go out and replace this role, we still got head count versus budget, it's just all this mess. And if we just understand the people that are open to learning and building new skills, and we do that faster, and then every time we have an opening, we're looking to our internal population first, and then maybe even coaching them on, you didn't get this role because of this, but I've got you in mind for this next role, right? So using that as an opportunity to sort of provide coaching and skill building to people, huge implications. And I do want to hit real quick on one other thing, which is the OC Tanner organization in their new research report has this piece on equitable flexibility. And I do think being a very manufacturing base in Michigan is so important that we get this right. We see it, we're struggling with it at Steelcase. It's this idea that we need to relook at our scheduling systems. We need to relook at our points systems. We cut so much cost out of our manufacturing cost structure that there's 90% of the people in these roles are living paycheck to paycheck. And so how are we making sure that we're being flexible, that when childcare is close because the ratios are off, somebody can set, so we've got to solve for these systemic challenges.
I see Lisa standing up there, so
I don't want to interrupt the conversation. I'm just enjoying this view.
That's good. I just want to build a little bit on what John said here, because I can't tell you how many times I've talked to business owners who, again, complain about the high level of turnover and say, it's like everybody wants a new job in 2 years. And my challenge back to them is then create that new job and keep that person within your organization, because yes, our attention spans are shorter, we're looking for the next opportunity faster, and we're preparing for it faster too. We have a lot more tools that can help people scale up better too. So I love the fact that we're looking, that you're specifically focused on internal growth and retention. That's really cool.
Can I sneak in a question?
Oh, yeah, I was just coming in to say, okay, I know you guys have, thank you so much for your insight, but I know that our audience members and our participants had some questions, so yeah, go for it.
Okay, great. This one looks like it'd be great for you, John. What does the future of fully remote and or hybrid work look like at your organization? And what challenges are being faced for those companies who are forcing team members to come back to the office?
Oh, there we go. So, first of all, here we go with alliteration again, but you gotta make return to office a magnet versus a mandate. Because we know from brain science that we are triggering folks when we mandate people back to the office. And I was at, again, that same conference a few weeks ago, an expert from Forrester was saying, mark my words, tech industry, as they, people are not having it, and your people with opportunities leave first, and so you're left with, the talent, you're gonna have to work harder for it, right, to get them where you need them. So we are triggering people's sense of status and certainty and all this stuff and taking away their autonomy that they had during the pandemic. So it's really how do you create, and honestly, Steelcase has done a pretty darn good job of it by saying, hey, we trust you to balance making the office your primary place of work, but also allowing you the flexibility you need to live your best life, right? So it's up to you to balance that and to navigate that with your manager. And so by giving people a sense that I get to control this sense of choice and control, people are much more likely to participate. So we do know from our research that something like, first of all, 56% of meetings are online, so hybrid is here to stay. So people want better, more equitable experiences when you do have a remote participant, so that's its own thing. If you had to guess which generation is in the workplace the most, what would you guess? Millennial. No, they're actually one of the lowest. So it's actually Gen Z. Gen Z is actually participating more, and what we're seeing is it's more of a life stage thing. People are coming to the office because they were alone at home, double income, no kid. They're looking for that socialization. They're looking for that mentoring. They're looking for that skill building that they can't get at home, right? And so there's a lot that you can do from home, but just be aware that generation, this generation that's coming into the workplace, is really demanding a different workplace than maybe what we left. It's the Gen Xers and the Boomers that are done with the workplace.
They have childcare to worry about.
This is true, right? It's life staging there, yeah. So yeah, just lots to unpack there. We know that we were in an attendance era, and then during the pandemic, we switched to a autonomous era. So everybody got a taste of autonomy for like 2 years, and now we're in the attention era. So it's really about, we've even dropped terms like programs and weekly meetings and whatever. We talk about rhythms, rituals, and symbols. So we're having to be a little bit, because we are globally distributed, we're digitally distributed. How do we build some rhythms, some rituals, some rites of passage that work for our organization, so that you're allowing that flexibility that needs to happen, but you still have to have people's attention if you're going to have collaboration and focused work and all that. So happy to talk more about it, but there's lots to unpack with that.
Yeah. Well, I love that, your team, you're focusing on science, right, and neuroscience, and that's so important, to kind of make those calls and lead the way. This question is for you, Beth. Okay, so in a recent report out of the Society for HR Management, SHRM, which many of you will be going to the SHRM conference maybe later today, they cited that the size of the gig workforce is on track to surpass the full-time workforce by 2027. So that might be surprising for many of us. In your opinion, will this help or be a hindrance to our current labor shortage?
I don't know if it's going to be a help or a hindrance, but I know it is happening. And we see it happening, and we see it happening online with some of the websites like Upworks and Fiverr and other places where folks are going to find their next gig. And we see it happen in organizations that are much more flexible about bringing people in when they're needed, and then helping them find their next assignment either internally or outside the organization when they're not. What I struggle with a little bit and is the idea that see if I can say this right, it's so much high tech that there's not enough touch with it, right? It's kind of novel to go to the website and put your information in, or maybe go shopping for a talent or a resource on one of those websites, but the idea of the connection, the human connection that we need so badly, isn't incorporated into that online presence, right? So that, I think, will be the challenge moving forward, is how do people move fluidly from assignment to assignment while still having a connection to a community that helps them feel like they're growing, like they're welcome, like they're doing valuable work, and that they've built some real human connection as a result of that.
I don't know if I can just jump in for 1 second. Just on that stat, I think that it's important to acknowledge that some of those gig workers are also full-time workers. So in other words, in order to keep up with the cost of living or to, invest in some of the things we talked about, they're also doing Instacart and pay, or they're, doing a shift driving cars and taking folks from the airport in the evenings. And that, I'm not an HR professional, but I can just imagine, and as, like I said, I was, helping run a company prior to this, the tired faces that come in because they're feeling like they can't keep up unless they also do that gig work. So I think that's just important to acknowledge as well. There's some double counting there, right? And that, some of those folks are pulling double or triple duty. It just brings us back to thinking about that cost of living, some of those challenges, and also good jobs like you alluded to before. So
Are you seeing a future, Hillary, where people have multiple jobs, so at the professional level, like fractional professionals? I know we do at HR Collaborative a lot of work with fractional CHROs and things of that nature. Is there a place in the future where organizations will be sharing professional talent pools and skilled labor pools?
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. I do think that folks will look for that kind of creativity and expression in their work, and if they can find it all in one place, that's great. But I certainly, I mean, I'm an elder millennial, so I'm no Gen Z up here, but I will say that in my even work history, when I look back on it, I did stay places longer than the average now, but I was always sort of co-creating something else. You know what I mean? I was sort of finding that other stuff somewhere else. I started my career in public policy, so when I made a pivot into tech, I also started a think tank on the side, and I was, you know what I mean, working on boards, and everyone, you know, so yes, I guess I'm an example of that, right? And I think folks will find a way to lean in and like scratch those itches and show up holistically and be creative and engage in full expression. And if you can do that in one place, great. And if you can't, I think they'll, you know, go and get it.
So let's build on one of those phrases that I heard John say earlier, a pound of retention and wait. An ounce of retention is worth a pound of recruitment.
We're like 6.
You guys said that right. So much of attracting talent, this is a question from the participants. So much of attracting talent and retaining talent lies in placemaking. We need the state, our communities, and our organizations to be places that people want to live, work, play, and learn. Can you speak to this concept from your unique lens, specifically to Hillary? What initiatives does the state have in place?
Yeah, absolutely is what I would say first. Again, you know, it's those legs of the stool, right? We have great opportunities, a welcoming place to home, and great places. Places is very much there at the center. One of the 4 work groups really growing Michigan Together Council is infrastructure in place, because we just need to think about placemaking. And when I mentioned that the polling that we did and these surveys we're doing across the state, you're hearing about housing, you're hearing about vibrant downtowns and walkability, transit. I can't tell you how many times folks said trains when I was in the UP yesterday. So it's, you know, all over. And currently the state already has some placemaking programs, and there were recent investments in the most recent budget into more of those placemaking programs. So we're moving in that direction. But I think the hope here is that we can engage in bold solutions. We need to lean in hard, more than incremental bites at the apple. We've benefited so much across our state, including folks here in Grand Rapids who have organizations like The Right Place in Holyoke, Michigan, who've like made it their business to make beautiful places that people want to be, and we've seen growth as a result. So those entrepreneurs are leading the way, but we can engage in that at such a bigger scale across our state. And I'm grateful for all the participation of the Growing Michigan Together Council work groups, but I hope that we get out really bold recommendations in that regard.
Well, that truly is inspiring.
If I may, just real quickly, so one of the things that always fascinated me was the growth of Silicon Valley, right? And how is it that there was such a concentration of talent around tech? And a couple of the books that I've read said, you know, it's not coincidental that happens, that a community that is attractive to good talent will naturally attract even more good talent, because folks want to interact with other people who can help them grow their careers and help them be successful and find other companies that they can potentially move to, or their spouses or partners could move to. So placemaking is a critical leg to the stool.
And we see that in our moments that matter. One of the interesting things for the hourly population, when we asked about the experience of joining, we gave them tons of choices. One of their top 3 moments that matter is Steelcase's reputation in the local community. And we're in like 47 different countries, and you know, so yes, we have a great reputation in West Michigan, but more than a well-written job posting, more than easy technology, having that reputation of people and planet and what my organization is doing for the community was a much bigger factor in getting us the lift in the talent acquisition that we've been. So.
Sorry, I'm mindful of my airtime, but just building on what you both said, you both mentioned reputation, and sort of in Silicon Valley, a community, right? And I do think that one thing I'd love to leave here with you all knowing is when we talked about marketing and branding and that storytelling being one of those assets that we need to lean into and get better at across our state and across the country. I'm not just talking about the high production value commercials, right? What actually matters are peer-to-peer interactions and folks telling folks that they trust what it's like to live and work in Michigan. So we're thinking about brand ambassador programs, we're thinking about equipping folks across our state to tell those stories, we're thinking about platforming different and more diverse voices and lived experiences across our state, we're thinking about cultural moments so that all eyes are on Michigan and they can see that we've always been this birthplace, this cradle of innovation, so of course we'll be in the future. We're sort of trying to get creative about in this era what actually is persuasive. And it isn't just top-down marketing, hierarchical marketing. It's something much different than that. So I hope we'll get a lot of engagement from all of you in the future, being loud and proud about Michigan.
Absolutely, and it sounds like you have a solution for the snow issue.
I love the weather question. I'm a glutton for punishment. True, when people think about Michigan, it's old and cold are two things that people get in Poland. We think it's like old and cold, like old fashioned, I don't know. But obviously, we're also number one in climate resilience. You want to cite a high capital intensive company somewhere, you do it in Michigan and it won't blow away. That's one thing. Two, how wild is it that folks talk about our weather when we're also like the cradle of life, like 80% of North America's freshwater and the world's longest freshwater coastline. We're so strategically positioned, so this is a great example of what people think and what perception is versus what the story can and should be here, right? It was 115 degrees for 4 weeks in Houston. No shade to folks in Houston, but I might send an air-conditioned bus. If you want to jump in, come on up. I just think it's a great example of how our weather and our 4 seasons and what have you is actually just this tremendous asset that we can talk about and be proud of and wear our stormy chromers and stomp around. And I'm excited for that part of it.
Yes. Well, Lisa, I bet we're getting close to time to go to our table discussions. Is that correct?
That's right. I don't mean to put a damper on this wonderful conversation, but we do want to give all of us at our tables an opportunity to have some discussion as well. So before we transition to that, I want to start by saying a big thank you to our panelists, Hilary, Jon, Beth. Thank you so much. And of course, a big thank you to Nancy for stepping in on such short notice. You did fantastic.